Well, thanks, Blaze, and everybody, and I'm glad everybody's still with us and kicking on. I'm Trent Teegerstrom. I'm Associate Director of Tribal Extension Programs and also Ag Econ Extension Specialist here at the University of Arizona. I'm going to be going over today. I'm on the SBAR team, on the sustainability team, as well as the extension team. They're kind of linked in there, as you'll see as we go through this. So we've been doing some of the economics and looking at the whole farm analysis, enterprise budget tools for evaluating the adoption of these two crops that we're looking at, because the SBAR is looking at the two crops. We wanted to combine them. We want to look at this at a whole farm analysis. The team below that you see there is myself, Clark Sievert from Oregon State, and then Sita and Paul from New Mexico State University. And we were also working, we've been working together on this quite a while. So in particular, this is going to be enterprise budgets and whole farm analysis in the same tool. Okay, so they're combined in there. This is a kind of mirrors or the one that's in the sustainability model, which is the integrated model, which is connected to the processing budget and processing process all the way through. It also includes the T and the LCA model as well in that integrated one. But we wanted to pull something out to where producers could kind of ask a little more personal questions about how this fits in their operation and how it looks on their particular operation instead of using that whole integrated model. But we wanted to keep it consistent with what we're looking at in the integrated model. So we pulled this out so we could demonstrate the financial risk for growers and adopting these new crops, or semi-new crops in some ways, and we feel it's required to see where they may fit into the current operation of the farm. Every farm is going to be different, so they're going to have to figure out where and how and if this fits, and just look at the different growing strategies that you have available. You want to analyze its overall financial impact, and that's why we did the whole farm analysis, because we want to look at this over the 6-year period with a net present value, kind of see over that 6-year period how this plant or this crop and these crop mixes kind of change your operation, or either enhance it, or where it might need a little more tweaking to do that. And that tweaking could come under these examined best practices that we'll be doing. And as you can see, based on the other presentations before us, this is an ever-changing kind of a program. So we have to make this fairly flexible so we can make adjustments as we're going through that. And we have been doing that the best that we can in conversations with Bridgestone and with the researchers as they're moving forward on the production practices. And Sam, of course, is heavily involved with guiding us through some of these production practices that we have on this. So first thing we want to do in this, and I'm not going to show the whole tool because there's a lot of pieces to it, but I want you to get you the general gist of what we are doing in here. So first you're going to do is you're going to set up the whole farm. You're going to set up your farm. Okay, so we set up here on the total tillable acres, and we put this at 1250 for the Arizona one. In New Mexico, it's more like 650 that they're doing. We put in here, of course, the guar and guayule. We also add in some hemp. If you're thinking of doing that, you don't have to use it. You can we zeroed it out here. But in the future, we wanted that to be an option available. And then we also have alternative crops, so you can type in something that you have in there that you don't see on this list, and you can add in that on the percentage there. You can add in whether you're doing flood, drip, or sprinkler, and any percentages that you want on that, and they'll tally up. And then the other thing that doesn't show on this is there is a water budget associated with this. So as you're growing these different crops and you're applying the water in different rates, then that will tally up how much water is applied relative to the amount you have available to use on that farm. So the reason we wanted to kind of add that in is we want to look at, this water savings for the drought tolerant plant like Guayule and see how much of a reduction there potentially would be on that. So you go in here and you just set up your percentages either way, and then it tallies it up and it carries it through the whole system. So this is the only place that you'd really have to set up your acreages. You can set the yields and prices, and I wouldn't get too caught up on these current prices right here or any of these really, because you can change them all. We did put a placeholder in here for the rubber, but as you heard what Dave talked about before, is we're still looking at that right now. This is pounds of biomass that's produced, but we can change and we can move that around either way. So it's just a way of looking at different things. And alternative crops, you can put that whatever it might be, whatever you're looking at, and then your yields, that you quantity per acres that you have on there. Of course, you're going to have to do equipment, and you also heard that they are trying to develop this where you're not really changing the amount of equipment, but this is a typical equipment that you find on any operation. I know it's really small, but you know that AgEcon, we like to put in really large tables with really small numbers so nobody can really see what we're talking about, but we do like to talk about it. So, but this is setting up your machinery mix that you would currently have on there. I will point out too that we do have placeholders in here where it would be custom rates. So if you're doing some custom rates, you can override that piece of equipment or that sequence, that operation, and put a custom rate in there, which is going to be important, especially when we're talking about, as you heard in the previous presentations, on harvesting. Okay, so the harvesting changing. It's most likely going to be a custom rate, so we'll be allowed to change that and move that in there at any given time. And that could be true for ripping as well, or any of these operations that you'd have in here. Okay, so, and then part of what you get out of here is this is the break-even price to growers based upon the adoption rate to the current cropping system being the one that you just saw on there with that crop mix, okay? So with all those other crops being grown at the 15% adoption, you're getting higher over here to 100% adoption on the farm, which means you're going to be growing more, so you're going to be producing more, so your cost is going to go down. And this is the break-even price, right? So it goes from 9 to 7 with 100% adoption on that farm. So that's kind of what we're looking at. And Guar is red and Guayule is the green, of course. So that's one kind of output that we would look at on this thing. But this one is one that we like a lot more because this is ever changing. We want the ability to make some changes in there and have a fairly broad sensitivity around the inputs that you as a grower select on this. So in this, what we're looking at here is a sensitivity to net present value of net returns per acre averaged over the establishment and production of Guayule at 10% of the total farm acres. And then the varying biomass prices and yields. So we're going to vary the yields, the prices, and we're going to make some adjustments up and down on your total cost productions that you're going to do there. So you can see as your prices change on the top over here, of course you're getting better. And then of course it's your yields, and this is in biomass for right now. But remember, as we're going down the road, we can do adjustments to it. And this is the base one. It's just as the numbers were entered in there. You can enter here. So here what we did was we decreased the cost of productions, but we left everything else the same. So it moved us to where we're a little more profitable coming up in a couple of areas, coming in here to the 19 at the 8 cents. But then if the costs go up for some reason, fuel prices, something else happens, water, anything else like that, then, and you can go 10, do whatever you want on this just to get a sense of the sensitivity and where that's moving at. And this one is in particular for Guayule, okay? The other one we did was for the Guar itself, looking at them. We did the same thing. Only remember when we set up the farm, we only chose to do 5% of the yields to a Guar, which Guar would fit into a rotation a little easier than Guayule because that's a 6-year crop, and this one is just the annual one that you put in. But so we put this in here, same thing, different yields. You can adjust the sensitivity around your production cost and your prices, where 16 cents here is the midpoint. And you can see how that kind of shifts around. But then we want to do the whole farm and see how these two play together on the whole farm. So what we've done here is combine those and looking at what we're doing at the base level and then the level 1 and level 2 and adding these costs. So you can see they're kind of changing around where our base here and our base here, and then our base in level 1 and level 2 and then increasing up here. So we're shifting those around. So this is all calculated in there. You don't have to do anything else as you're setting those up in your whole farm. It will automatically be generating these budgets or these sensitivity tables, and you can just go in there and then like change the production costs here and here. If you don't want to go back and change any, say, well, what happens if harvest goes up by 30% or something like that? So you can change a percent. So that's what we're doing with that to get some, a little more flexibility to look at some options. The other things we're doing as you're going through and developing is selecting how much of each of these operations you want on there in the acreage. It is developing enterprise budgets. But we like to do the whole farm analysis, but it's also good sometimes to look at the enterprise budget itself to focus on that crop and see what it takes to grow. Again, don't get hung up on the numbers on here because these are, you know, we're still tweaking them slightly, but they're fairly good on some of these, and we're going to be coming out with some enterprise budget publications, both on Guayule and Guar for Arizona and New Mexico. And at least they're going to be starting points that we're going to have on there. So they should be coming out on that. And you can see we do the returns, we do variable costs, fixed costs, and then fixed non-cash costs, depreciation, that kind of stuff on the equipment used. And then you get your returns minus annual total cost on there. We do an establishment cost for Guayule, set up that budget, and you look at the operations that we'd have in there so far. Remember, those change. And the prices change, but this is where we're at right now. We look at then the fixed non-cost depreciation charges on there with your equipment that you would have associated with that. And you get your annual total cost for establishment, at least at this point, given how we have it in our example that we're doing there. But it would calculate this for yourself. So if once you started plugging in your own numbers and you wanted to, you'd be able to print off these Guayule and Guar budgets and all the other crop budgets specific to your operation. And then you're going to want to do the growing years. So you're adding in there, making some of the cultivations that were talked about, some of the sprays. Then you add in that, and then the harvest. And this one we actually said as not custom rates, but we were going to harvest this, but it's a little lighter on the harvest cost, but this is where we're at it. And then we used 8 cents at 20,000 pounds of biomass as it returns to have that in there. So as you can see, it comes down here, the non-production cost on that. So we did break it up by those specific ones because the establishment, you're doing specific things to it. And then in the growing between those, each of the harvesting, there's operations that you're doing that are different than when you're doing on the harvest year. So we wanted to separate those out, and each of these budgets would be printed out to do that. And here's the fixed cost on the harvest as well. The other thing we're doing, and I'm kind of going through this fairly fast because I think I'm going to get us on time here, but the other thing we're looking at, we're going to look at several things. We're looking at the adding in the different kind of harvest operations, that what they would look like. But we're also looking at the cash rent leases versus crop share leases, what those might look like when you're establishing. But this is really early on right now. So we're just trying to get an idea of what that would look like, different options available if you're doing contracts over a certain amount of years, you know, how you'd want to maybe or set that up, and then working with Bridgestone and some other things. Just as a thought. It's not that what we're doing right now, but we want to hopefully have something in place and ready to go if that is indeed something that some of the options would want to come out on that. So moving forward on some of these other ones we're looking at, we're going to do keep expanding the whole farm economic analysis tool. We really want this tool to be something that the grower can take home or, go to do more of these workshops and actually talk through how to change, what to change, and actually do some what if scenarios and just get a good feel of what these things might look like. Change the inputs, prices, and yield assumptions, see what that's going to impact, make some changes and make it fit your operation a little better. So it's a little more realistic about your operations relative to kind of a, what we're saying is more a generalized, generic overall view of it, where we're at. When we wanted to, because it's always important to have some enterprise budgets for each of these crops. So all the crops that you saw in this scenario that you had in there, they would each have a enterprise budget generated from that. So as you're going through and making those changes, so you'd have that. And it's real important. Enterprises budget, so like I mentioned, that's only part of your analysis, but we really needed to do that whole farm analysis to truly see how that fits in the operation on the economics from a net present value over that 6-year period. Because remember, you're expanding now from these annual crops potentially to the 6-year crop. So that's a kind of slightly different beast than just going to the annual one. So we wanted to try to put those on even footing and put that across the whole operation. So when you look at that change or that adoption, you're comparing apples to apples as best you can. And then, so then that's where this understanding the impact of net present values that we talked about there is critical before adopting and seeing where it's going to fit into your operation, see what kind of impact that has. And we still need to increase the flexibility in the analysis on this. The competition for the other crops, come on, there's a lot of talk on hemp, but I think that's kind of tapering down a bit in a lot of the areas, but there's other crops. There's always going to be new crops coming in, and you want to be able to roll those into your mix when you can. And also, we, as you noticed, maybe didn't notice on there, we also put a fallow in there, so you'd have a rest area that you can kind of adjust. Coming in, since we are in Arizona, of course, water is always going to be hot on everybody's mind. So the regional water availability and crop use, that's why we added that farm water budget in there, just to get a better handle on what the impact would be as you're doing different combinations of these crops that you would have on your operation. And I'm sure most of the growers now do already have a good handle on this, but when you start introducing a new crop like this, and you want to see that impact overall on the water and on the economic side of it, it would have to, that would be real important. And then of course, as I just briefly hit on, the leasing option is something that we're really kind of exploring, figure out what that might look like. And we're using a couple of different, integrated pieces on that. It won't necessarily be in this tool. It will be a separate tool that we've done with some other colleagues called equitable lease kind of a program. And then of course the harvest cost. Right now, we, as you saw in the budget there, we did price that out as and we modeled it after the alfalfa. But we also put it in as a custom rate, so we can flip back and forth on that. If custom rate makes more sense, then that's easily adjusted in there, and it's a lot easier to manipulate in that sense because you're not dealing with as much equipment on that. We're also working in collaboration with Finn and Daniel on their group where they're looking at the logistics of getting this from the field to processing plants, and some of these are going to come into play about scheduling the harvest and when you're going to schedule the harvest in a particular field, so it gets into the plant fairly fresh and not sitting in the field. We are looking to at maybe a field storage, but that is not looking at this point anyway like that might be the option for storing it, but we're still going to be pursuing that and looking to see what impacts that might have. And with that, I believe I am done. Got us there on time.
Thank you, Trent.
Yeah.